Oh my God, you're racist, what a terrible person you are.
Here we are once again for the PAVLOVCAST without Pavlov.
That's it, man.
Might have to change the name. First topic I wanted to speak to you about was the Danny Baker monkey baby tweet. This presenter, Danny Baker, put out a tweet of a picture of a monkey and said the royal baby has arrived.
I see, yeah.
And due to the royal baby, is it Prince, I'm going to get this wrong, Archie, having mixed heritage, part black ancestry, that was deemed as racist,
right.
And he was immediately fired by the BBC.
Yeah.
Good decision, bad decision.
Not one for simple answers. So, okay, well, I looked it up today, because as you know, I don't particularly follow these type of events, but I looked it up and read a little bit about it.
Nor does Danny Baker.
Right.
That's why he claimed he didn't know what race any of the people involved were. But
it's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible. But some questions come to mind when this type of situation appears. So the first thing I want to say is that I think a lot of backlash or outrage that comes from these things is because it's socially endorsed. The type of virtue signaling. It's very, very easy to do, and it might not have any substance to it. That doesn't mean that there might not have been some sort of racially motivated intention with the guys. Actually, I have no idea, don't know the guy, don't know anything about him. But what I mean is that there's no barrier to entry for saying, oh my God, you're racist, what a terrible person you are, you get fired, you know? Nothing. It's endorsed, you should do this, and maybe that's a good thing, there's different arguments about it, but what I mean is that I question the sincerity of people's outrage quite often, if you understand me.
Outrage culture.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. We feel good about ourselves to be outraged at someone else doing something terrible, as it means, well, I would never do that.
Of course, so that it leads to this...
I'm better than that person.
Exactly. It leads to this very pertinent question of looking at history or looking at modern events and imagining what you are capable of. Like, it's an idea you might have heard before. It's quite a simple idea. Is that if you're going to look at the terrible things that happen in history, let's say, maybe most people read that and imagine themselves as being the victim, or imagining themselves as being the savior, the person that goes against the grain, that is like vilified by society because they don't go along with the Moors, even if they're terrible or genocidal. They imagine that. They don't imagine them doing it.
Yeah.
What's more likely? Look at history. How many self-sacrificing saviors do you have? Very, very few. So all this virtue signaling for me is banal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I suspect, just as we look back on previous times and say, oh, I can't believe we kept black and white people separate, I can't believe people threw bananas at football matches.
Yeah.
We may look at this and say, oh, I can't believe we fired innocent people for inadvertently making a comment that could be misconstrued as racist.
Right.
I think that the time will come, because if you're genuinely not racist and you don't think that black people resemble monkeys, then there's no problem in using phrases such as cheeky monkey or are you dancing like a monkey, like our friend had a problem with. But in the aftermath of racism, and 20 years, 30 years is not a long time in the grand scheme of things, maybe it is too early and we still do need to tread on eggshells around the issue.
Interesting. What do you think is the value of that, of this treading on eggshells, as you say? Because I've also heard the idea said by a number of prominent, maybe famous African Americans, black people, whatever. These guys saying, if you want to make it a non-issue, then stop talking about it.
Yes.
Stop making it this badge of pride.
There is that. And for an issue like this, I guess it's for the black community to tell everyone else when they're ready. Like reclaiming the word and the use of the N-word, and that's why it's different. I mean, when I work with young people, I try and emphasise that no form of racism is acceptable, but I'm not going to be naive enough or probably the wrong word, stupid enough to say it's the same when a white person says it as when a black person says it.
Right. Okay.
Because and if you do that, then you're just being like the PC brigade, who on the other side just reduce everything to words rather than meaning. Oh, you said the N-word. When Diane Abbott on morning TV said that she'd been called a nigger, the outrage was not that she'd been called such a word, it was that she'd said it on daytime TV, and people were writing and saying, my young daughter was watching that, how could you dare use that word? But she's highlighting the real issue, that she was a victim of racism. If you just reduce it to words and trying to catch people out, say, oh, you're racist, I'm not.
Right.
You're missing the point. Diane Abbott was explaining what real racism is. And
well, let's get a working definition, if we can, at least between us two in this conversation. Imagine people might disagree, that's fine. What is our working definition of racism for this discussion? Let's see, I can suggest something, tell me what you think. It's difficult because I'm just going through multiple tiers of analysis of what things might mean, but let's say this one. So if you, it's very difficult to define. So let's say, because you've got genetics, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got phenotypes and genotypes. Then you've got culture. Then you've got where you originate. Then you've got being part of a different interest group. And I know that's, people would say that's not racism. So race is meant to be about genetics, but we don't. When people talk about it, they don't really know what they're talking about. We're genetically almost identical.
Yeah. And last week we talked about the Balkans, and we mentioned that Serbs and Bosnians are the same colour with the same language, and they differ on religion, but they're not racially different. But it was still racism that caused them to massacre each other. I think we can call it racism, or whatever you want to call it. Xenophobia.
It's really tricky, man.
Is
tricky.
The conflict in the north of Ireland racism, or it's sectarian? But I think it's racist in the minds of the people. They probably believe that they are a different race.
Right, or sufficient enough to be consider themselves a different group.
Yeah, it's in groups and out groups, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah. So maybe it's looking at a set of people that you consider to be outside of yourself, that don't belong with your group, right? And assuming in a blanket that these people are in some way, you could say one thing inferior, another that they would all possess certain characteristics that you think are negative. Maybe that's racism right there.
Yeah.
An out group of which you don't know these people, but you put on them labels of them being certain things.
Yeah.
Like, you're just a white male.
Yeah. Yeah, you're okay.
Classic one.
Do you feel that white males have been legitimized for attack?
I feel that starting anything with white male is
But you're a white male. What would you know?
Exactly. What I mean is, I've had these discussions with people before in the park, for example, about using groups and how it's not a good idea.
Well, we are two white males, as far as I can tell. Are we wrong to be wading in on this Danny Baker story, and who are we to say what the tweet about a monkey was? If black people feel, now I've been threatened over the years by people that compared me to a monkey, it's not for you to say whether that tweet was acceptable.
Well, I fundamentally disagree. Like, I'm going to comment on what I feel like, and I don't think that anything delegitimizes that. An exception may be if I was talking about a specialist scientific matter or a piece of technical knowledge of which I know nothing about.
Is racism not a specialist matter for those that have suffered at the hands of racists? And perhaps you have, I don't know.
Well, I mean, if somebody hasn't, you can still think about it and still talk about it and say what you imagine is going on. I mean, if we're going to ban somebody from being able to comment on a topic because they haven't experienced something, I think we're just going to spiral into despair. We're either going to be free to talk about things, or we're all gone.
Yeah. Well, some things are off limits.
So they say.
Yeah.
Such as?
Exposing the truth about the Iraq War. I mean, I'm delving into Julian Assange now.
Oh yeah.
Which is an ongoing topic. Okay, but to draw a line under the monkey baby, it sounds like we sort of agree. I'm trying to play devil's advocate. My opinion of the matter is that Danny Baker was not intentionally racist. I think this is an excessive move to fire him, but I think people are so paranoid about coming across as racist because racism in recent history was so atrocious, and we've swung back the other way, and now we're hyper sensitive to the guilt. And I think it's the white people who are secretly racist have a paranoia about being found out.
It could be that,
and therefore try and do everything. I mean, I'm very sure the people at the BBC who made the decision to sack Danny Baker would have been white themselves.
Right.
I imagine.
But what I want to say is that, I mean, humans have got natural impulses. We form groups, we form tribes. This is what we do.
Yeah.
And the out group is always considered to be hostile in some regard until proven otherwise by interpersonal contact.
Yeah.
This is, and by nature of our physicality, of our evolutionary history, this can be proven.
Yeah.
So the things that we observe in a society like this, like you look at someone, you go, oh, something might happen in your brain, you look at how they appear, and they might appear some way that you think is negative for some possible reason, or a previous experience you've had in the past, somebody looked similar, and you naturally think, oh no, I'm going to avoid that guy. That's a survival mechanism. Doesn't mean that it's right or good or just, because it's not. But it's what we instinctively do is that, and it takes discipline of your mind to try and push that out of your consciousness. You know what I mean? We all do that.
Do you think that's where racism comes from?
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Out-group? Because a tribe, a rival tribe years ago would have been a threat.
Yeah.
So should we consciously fight against that?
I would say so. Okay. Absolutely, because I think that my baseline is a very, very simple one, is that we should treat all humans the same in terms of legality and human rights.
So not all human urges or urges for survival are good? Then?
No, well, not in our modern day, not at all, because we live very differently than we did a long time ago. There's a thing that's quite fascinating, is our explosion of intelligence. People have tried to track how our intelligence has progressed from our ancient ancestors, and there's a massive difference between, let's say, the great apes and the chimpanzees, which are very closely related to us, and us. Well, there's a massive void, and we can't really explain why that happened.
So we've got deep,
we've got deep instincts that are still like very, very, very tribal, and that's how we operate. We just clothe it differently these days, but we have this higher intellect that can question itself, and that's what we're doing here.
I might have misunderstood you, but often I thought you thought we should be going back to nature and following these urges because that's somehow our natural inclination, and that society has moved away from that, and that's the problem with society.
Well, that's quite interesting. I would like to know why you think that's what I think. I've not talked about many things like that, I don't think.
I think I got the impression when you were talking to me about the archetypes and the famous book that we might mention.
The Nameless Book.
The Nameless Book, available in all good libraries somewhere. I sensed that you thought man should be an alpha male, like the leader of a pack or a tribe, and that this was our nature, and that we've become decadent and society has moved away from it.
No, it's much finer than that.
Let's go deeper then.
So
it's good that we've stumbled on this.
Right. So, well, the thing about the archetype is a different kind of discussion, but like what I was trying to say, and anything I was saying about being alpha or whatever, I mean about self-control. Not about exercising power upon others, which is this other connotation, which obviously is real. But the true mastery is mastery over oneself. That is what precision of what I'm talking about.
I think but a man who has that mastery will emerge as a leader of other men, and men will look up to him, and women will be attracted to a man whom other men look up to. And that goes back to our living in the tribal community.
I understand that. I understand where you're coming from, but another part of it is the analysis of self and they say the integration of your personality, which is not the going back to primeval.
Okay.
It's well, it kind of is, but it doesn't mean that you throw away. Well, it's very hard to describe, man. Like what I'm trying to say is, I think there's different levels of human instinct. You've got basic ones, which are all ground level survival, which are primary drivers towards not dying and reproducing, these things. And then you've got, I would say, just my term, higher human instincts of being able to question things, question yourself, wonder about the universe, to explore ideas, to explore the mind. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying about self-actualization or mastery of the self, or like we talked about last time with Pavlov, we got a bit of discussion there about transcendent values, talking about something that you can come to the conclusion that would be more valuable than yourself, and you can live by that. Is that any clearer?
And for most people, the only thing worth more than themselves is their children.
Ideally, I think.
Is that ideal?
Well, what I mean is that
ideally they should.
Ideally they should, but I think quite
children.
often that's not the case.
Okay.
Unfortunately, but it evolutionarily it should be.